So, welcome back to the Real Estate Sitdown presented by WB Homes and the Pemberton Home Team. This is episode 37. I'm Blair Berg, and this is Amber Perez. How are you doing, Amber?
I'm recovering. My voice is a little messed up, but
Yeah.
I had some sort of sinus infection last week that my beautiful little daughter brought home to me from daycare.
Great.
Yeah.
Kids are great.
Yeah, they're disgusting.
Yeah. So, today, at the time of recording, it is Monday, February. Yeah.
Yeah,
At the time
it's
recording today,
February.
at the time recording today is Monday, February 5th, 2024, and the interest rate for a 30-year conventional loan is 6.92.
Woo, still
So-
under 7.
Yep, still essentially what it was last week, so no change there really. No movement there.
And the good thing is it's expected to come down eventually.
Yep, I heard, the Fed meeting went well, and they're talking about dropping that sooner than later, so.
Yep.
Hopefully that hits with the spring market. So today, I thought we would open it up with a segment we haven't done in a while, Deal Doctor, where we break down a deal. So, Amber, go ahead, tell us about a deal, and we can go ahead and talk details.
I actually just closed this deal last week. It was one of the hardest deals of my career that I've done. And I made sure that we had every single piece of documentation that we possibly needed in case something went south. So my buyers returned clients to me. They're phenomenal to work with, love them to pieces. We're looking for their first investment property, and they used a VA loan. They are owner occupying it. And they bought a single-family house with a detached garage that has an apartment unit above it. And they're going to live in that apartment unit and rent out the house for the amount of the mortgage. Phenomenal.
Yep.
Brilliant, right? So that it all looks great on paper. We went to the showing and we walk in, and the first thing I notice is the side of the house is like doing this motion, and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. But on paper everything looks great on this house, so I'm like, okay, you know what, we'll write the offer contingent on a structural engineer going in and reviewing it, and if there's anything that needs to be done, the seller doing what needs to be done to make sure it's structurally sound. There was some other things that needed to be done because the seller had bought it in pretty rough shape, so he was flipping the property. Beautiful property. Like he did a really nice job of making it really shiny. So we get to the home inspection, and we had 4 pages of repairs that needed to be done on top of the structural concerns. So there were some structural concerns. The seller did actually go in and make those structural repairs proper. When we went to have the final walkthrough, this was like a day before closing, about half of the stuff on the repair request form that we had sent over that were agreed upon for repairs were not completed. So we did another extension, and we went right up until the rate extension or the rate expired on the buyer's mortgage. The day before that, we did another final walkthrough, which we had the seller pay for because we had the home inspector go back out again for the 3rd time to review these things. And the list still wasn't completed. And the builder was actually present for that, and he was upset because he ended up finding out that his subcontractors subcontracted the work.
Really?
Yeah, so the secondary subcontractors never did the work that they were supposed to do. So we had to get a little creative, and what we did was the buyers were able to close on that property with an escrow holdback for those repairs in a pretty substantial amount, and the seller also provided a 10-year structural warranty. I don't know if you know this, but 2-10 does 10-year structural warranties on renovated properties.
Okay.
You have to send in your documentation, you have to send in structural reports, you have to send those things in, but they exist.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a good response to the situation, and we had to be creative in that situation because of the situation, because of all the moving parts that were going on.
Yep. Yeah, no, and for anyone listening that might not be privy to some of the terminology in that, so besides it being a huge headache when you have to push back closing, when you push back closing, you come up against your rate lock expiration.
Yeah.
That becomes expensive because you pay to lock your rate, and if you're going to extend it, you have to pay more.
Yeah, and you can't just let your rate lock expire, because if you do, you're essentially letting your mortgage application expire.
Exactly.
You have to restart the entire process. So it's not as easy as, oh, the rates are better next week, we'll just wait a week to close. No, it doesn't work like that. You will lose all of you have to get another appraisal. You have to do everything all over again.
Well, on top of that, too, if rates got worse, well, now
Yeah.
you've given up your good rate, too. So it's just a headache to do.
It is.
And then with the escrow holdback, and I'm sure in your situation, usually it's like price and a half of whatever you get for an estimate on what the repairs would be.
Yeah, usually it's 1.5 times the amount. This particular one, there was so much to do. We just came across a number that made sense for the seller and the buyer.
Yeah.
Because, the seller had put in about $150,000 worth of renovations into this particular property. And he didn't have the money, the cash set aside to be able to go and make these repairs. So, because he had already paid somebody who obviously didn't do the job.
Yeah.
So we had to close on the property with the guarantee that this work was going to happen. So with the escrow holdback, if the work doesn't happen within a set time frame, the buyers get that cash and they can go have it done for themselves.
Exactly. So that escrow holdback is the seller's not getting that money on close. It's held from them. Once the repairs are done, it's released. But
right.
Yes. So obviously headaches all around, but it sounds like you at least came to a solution there.
Yeah, we came to a solution, and it was very touch and go. Like, the buyers decided that they were okay with signing literally 30 minutes prior to the closing scheduled time. And I told them up front, like, you don't have to sign right now. We can push this. We can have the seller pay for your rate extension, like whatever you're comfortable with doing. They decided they were comfortable with all the terms that were laid in front of them, and they pushed forward.
Yep. And that's the tricky thing, too, when it comes to stuff like that, because I'm sure they weren't super happy with how it ended. But when you're dealing with a house, like somewhere you're going to live, delays in that cause a lot of problems. Like, there's a trickle-down effect, because whether you were leasing before, you need it, like, your lease might be up now. Now it's like you don't really have a choice. Yeah.
In their case, they already owned their home. They had built during COVID, and their build actually got delayed by 6 months.
Yeah.
So they've had problems closing before. And I was telling their lender, I feel horrible, because every time they work with me, there's some sort of delay, and it's not anybody's fault. Like, it's not my fault that it got delayed, but this one happened because of COVID. Like, the original one happened because of COVID, and the builder couldn't get the supplies, and you know how things happen during COVID. And then they owner occupied that for a while, and both of them are VA. So one used their VA benefits for this one, and then they decided that they wanted to do this. So now they're owner occupying this and using their VA loan, using the other one's VA benefits for this particular property.
Did they sell the last one?
No, they held on to it for rental.
Yeah,
they're making a ton of money on that rental now.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, like, their tenant moves in February 15th or something like that. So we did have a deadline that we had to work with.
Yeah, so that throws a wrench in things. Obviously, it's like you're more inclined to accept an offer at that point, because you have to move.
Yeah, you have to. And the option was, like, we have I have the property manager that I put them up with, Rafiq. He has, like, temporary housing solutions in his back pocket, so we could have put them somewhere else.
Yeah, but no one wants to move twice.
Right, and they have a roommate, and their roommate has a cat, and they have a dog, and it's just a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's good that you guys are able to come to that, because I know a lot of times sellers are going to fight tooth and nail to not do an escrow holdback, so it's good that he was willing to do that. It sounds like the seller bought a flip that he was not. He must. I would guess he's fairly new, because it sounds like.
So he actually does new construction.
Really?
Yeah,
and he saw the foundation and he didn't think.
He does new construction. He hadn't dabbled in renovating properties in several years, and he bought this house on too good of a deal to turn down. Like I think he paid like 55,000 is what
Wow,
I saw in
yeah.
the taxes. So like honestly, like if I was a builder and I saw that opportunity, I'd probably take it too.
Yeah.
I'm sure now he's wishing he wouldn't have. And I told his agent after all this was done, I was like, why didn't he just knock it down and build something new?
Yeah.
Like
I was
it
say-
would have made sense.
Because I was like, I understand the buy then, because a lot of times you can't even get a lot for 55,000. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
All right. Yeah. No, I think that was good. I like that too. It had a lot of different things, a lot of ins and outs.
There
So
it was. Oh man.
no two deals are ever the
No,
same.
they're not.
Yeah. So next, we'll move on to the comment section. In last week, between the clips and stuff that I put out for the show, I put out like stupid little real estate memes and stuff.
Sure.
I had put out a meme, and I can't even remember what the actual video was, but it was talking about how real estate agents also have lives. I think it had something to do with like a buyer asking to look at a house like last minute when you're already committed to a family thing. Anyway, so and these comments are not unusual. Real estate agents not super popular online, but some of the comments I got, one was y'all some con artists, GTFO, people that get me a place to live. And then another one that said the average buyer wants to spend as little time talking to the con artist of a salesperson as possible. Skipping formalities that serve no purpose in the interaction is an excellent way to do that. So I thought today would be a good jumping off point to talk about how real estate agents actually get paid in all the different ways that we actually get business and how that works out. So
Right.
Amber, I thought you before we started filming, you had some good thoughts on that.
Yeah. So my direct thought on this is when you hire a real estate agent, you are hiring an agent for a service, right? You can do anything you want on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean you should. Okay, like if you don't know anything about plumbing and you've got a leak under the sink or under your house or whatever, you're not going to go down there and try to fix it yourself. You're going to hire a plumber because you're not going to know what to do, right? So again, a plumber is a service. Is a plumber a con artist? No, they have a trade. That's what they do. I'm not saying that I'm like a plumber, not in the least bit, but I offer a service just like a plumber does. And my service just happens to be real estate sales.
Well, and the thing too is, and you use the example of a plumber, obviously if you could figure out how to do what you're hiring the plumber to do, it would be cheaper because you're paying him. There's built-in costs. He has to stay licensed with his contract.
Yep.
He has to live. He has to make a living. He has to pay for all these different things. So there is upcharges to it because he can't just pay you at for the materials.
Yeah, you can't expect somebody. You're paying somebody for their time and their knowledge. You're not paying them to sit there and do nothing.
Well, and essentially too, and I think I hear a lot of agents put it this way when they're prospecting. It's like every day you wake up, you're unemployed.
Yeah.
You're looking for the next person to hire you. That's your job.
Absolutely.
So this is a job. You are making money so that you can live and provide. And when you are good at your job, you make more money.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, like, I don't care if you buy a house or not. That's on you.
Yeah.
I don't care. If you're ready to buy a house and you want to work with me, that's when I care.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's a perfect example of, like you say, it is a service. No one's putting a gun to your head and saying you have to work with us. But obviously with there being an industry for this, people find value in it.
Absolutely. And people are willing to spend thousands of dollars for representation because they don't know how to do what we do.
And it's funny, too, because I think a lot of the comments online come from people who don't own houses and have never been through the process. They just see the news and they're like, why am I paying this? Blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
But, I mean, I work with plenty of investors who have bought and sold tons of houses, and they still use an agent.
Absolutely.
Because
I have an agent that uses me every time.
One, they can't be bothered with it. They have better things to do because it's not their job.
Right.
Two, they don't want to get into the ins and outs of the legal contracts, things like that. They don't need to learn a new skill. They see the value in paying for that.
Yep, absolutely.
And if anyone that listens to the show is probably sick of me using this analogy, but I always compare it to using a lawyer.
Yeah.
Because technically you could go to court and represent yourself in the court of law, but you don't know anything about law.
Yep.
So while you could do it, you're your own freedom to do that. it's gonna suck, and you're probably gonna go to jail for whatever you're being charged with.
Probably. And the other thing is like we deal with contracts every day. We are not attorneys by any means, and if there's something that comes up, we are going to advise you to speak to an attorney, absolutely.
Yep.
But we also went to school and take continuing education courses so that way we can stay up to date on the contracts that we are using. We know the fair housing laws. We know what's required for disclosures. And if you don't know these things, you can find yourself in a whole lot of hot water.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny too. So many episodes back, I talked about like my favorite house in my neighborhood went up for sale. And it was for sale by owner, and it had the shittiest pictures I've ever seen for a listing.
Cell phone?
Yeah. It was
favorite.
bad. It was bad.
Lights off?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the pictures didn't even show the home. It was like showing pictures like
Of the
out
flowers?
on the lake, and like it looked like at one point they put the phone in the grass, and it was just like overgrown grass, and they just took pictures of the grass. Anyways,
Solid.
But it's a $1.5 million home. And they thought that they were gonna cut
And they're
corners
saying
and save
Augustine
money.
Grass was going to sell the house,
Yeah.
right?
So, and it sat for months unsold. Then I drive by, a couple months later, and they have now a real estate sign in their yard. They've now hired somebody, and guess what? Now it's under contract at the same price.
I bet.
They had updated professional photos, and they still got it under contract. And obviously, I don't know what the final price was, but it's contingent right now at that $1.5 million.
I'm sure it's sold for more than that.
And it's just, and so for people that want to save money, you're not saving any money because that listing agent was able to secure you
a buyer
well,
the other
at that
thing
price
is
point that you wanted.
People don't think about the back end cost too. Every month that your house is on the market is an extra mortgage payment that you have to pay, and that's thousands of dollars in most cases too. And you're still responsible for the maintenance. You're still responsible for cutting the grass. Guess what? Gas prices are up. It's costs money to cut the grass.
Yeah. And we had kind of hinted at it too before we started filming, and we're talking about how obviously the lawsuit's going on about buyer's agents compensation and stuff. And it sucks because it seems like everyone online is celebrating that they want to move towards a model where the seller is no longer paying for the buyer's agent.
Right.
And I think people don't understand the ins and outs of it, in that they're not realizing that as a buyer, that's going to suck for you.
It's going to be detrimental.
Because, and sorry about stepping on your toes, because I have like a whole spiel that I keep going over, but everyone wants the home buying experience to be like buying something on Amazon.
Right.
But you're not buying like a skateboard. You're not buying a TV. This is an entire home, and you don't know the things you need to know to even inspect it. And if we move to a way where, here's what I'm seeing is like people are celebrating this, and it's kind of moving to this. So if we get rid of buyer's agents compensation, no one's going to use buyer's agents because they don't want to pay for them.
Right.
And first time home buyers generally don't have the extra money to pay that 2.7%.
Right.
Which
or 3
is
in some markets.
Yeah. And sellers seem to be forgetting when they bought their home, someone paid for their buyer's agent.
Yes.
And now they don't want to pay it forward to the next person. But the thing is, the sellers have that extra equity to give because they're selling a home. The home buyer generally the first time, because it's usually for first time home buyers that they're getting that benefit.
Right.
They don't have the extra money.
You're right, they don't.
So you get into the home, now when you build equity, you do it for the next person. So we're moving towards an area where I think Zillow, it would end up being like Amazon. Real estate agents now are just Zillow consultants, and you go online, you buy it, you have no one defending you and looking out for what's best in your interest.
Yep.
Now you're buying homes that don't have seller's disclosures. Things aren't like, no one's advising you to get an inspection. And now you got what you wanted. You're buying something on Amazon, but now you're going to move into a home and you have no clue what you just did.
Yeah. So Virginia is a buyer beware state. So it's kind of like we don't have seller disclosures in Virginia, right?
Okay.
So you have to do your due diligence or else you're not going to know what you're buying. And if you don't have a buyer's agent guiding you to do that, that's where my concern for the general public is, because 90% of people have no idea the questions they're supposed to ask. They have no idea what to look for. Like if they see a structural crack, they're not going to know what the difference between a structural crack and a regular crack to save their life.
Yep.
They're just going to see a crack in the wall and go, oh, some Bondo will fix that, or,
Yep.
whatever, or we can fix that. And no, you can't just fix a structural crack like that. You have to fix the problem at the source. But experienced agents know when they see that kind of stuff. And if they have questions, they know who to ask. The other thing is with the percentages that buyer agents are being paid, the seller is agreeing to one percentage, whether that be 5, 8, 10, whatever the selling percentage is that they're agreeing to. And then a part of that gets split down into their agent and the buyer's agent. So however this listing agent decides to break that up is the listing agent's decision. I mean, I've seen some listing agents only offer 1%. I've seen 5%. I've seen selling bonuses on top of the percentages. There's all sorts of different compensation rates, so they're all negotiable. But what's important to note is that when a buyer's agent is representing a buyer, the buyer is ultimately responsible for whatever the agreed upon percentage is. And it varies in different markets. Like I know it's usually 2.7% here.
Yeah.
In Virginia, it's usually 3%.
Yeah.
So again, those are all negotiable. Nobody's set a rate. But if the listing agent is not offering what you've agreed upon as the buyer to compensate your agent, you are responsible for the remainder of that payment. It is up to the agent and their broker if they're going to enforce that or not. I know in the past I've had buyer agency agreements for 3% and the listing agents only offered 2.5%, and I've chosen not to go after for that 0.5% because it's just I didn't feel like it was necessary.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on who you work with as to whether they're going to go for that or not.
Yeah, and we're seeing, like, obviously with the lawsuits now, we're seeing people offering less. But the thing is, those houses usually sit longer.
Oh yeah.
And so I
Yeah,
don't know.
so-
It is a trade-off. I mean, it's nice. I also get sellers who are like, okay, how much realistically should we be offering for a percentage so we can draw? So they're understanding, like, hey, if we
Yeah.
offer more for the buyer's agent, we're gonna get more eyes on it. It just
Sure.
is. So
yeah. So even though, all right, let's pause. I like your thought. So if you are a home seller and you're considering not offering a buyer's agent compensation, my word to you would be careful and pick your poison, because even though you're not required to offer it, there are agents out there, and I'm not saying that myself or Blair are one of them, but that will overlook your home because you're not offering to pay them and they know their buyer can't afford to pay them.
yeah,
So they are obligated to show your property. They are, but put yourself in their shoes for a second. If you knew your buyer couldn't pay your salary or pay your paycheck, and you have two identical homes and one is offering to pay 2.75% or 2.7% and the other one's offering $5, which house are you going to take your buyer to? And they're identical.
yeah, and that's where we're still technically in a seller's market, and that's where sellers right now, I mean, they have most of the power in the situation, so they've been spoiled. They think they can get away with that kind of
Sure.
stuff. But yeah, when it eventually moves back to a buyer's market, yes, you have options. It's like, well, I'm not gonna buy your house because I want to pay my agent when this
Right.
one's gonna cover
So
that payment.
To my point, though, is whenever we see that there's two identical houses, one offers this amount and the other doesn't, we're going to take that to our buyer and say, hey, Mr. Buyer, we can go see this house, but if you like this house, you are obligated to pay my 2.75% because the seller's not offering that here. Are you able to do that? The buyer then is going to say, no, let's skip that house.
Yeah.
That is the conversation that is about to be had.
Yep, and I always sign my buyer reps for 2.7%, but generally, so yes, like you said, in Minnesota, in the metro area, it's generally 2.7. When you get a little bit out on the outskirts, it usually changes like 2.5. I've noticed in more rural areas, which is perfectly fine. And I never, if it goes to 2.5, I'm like, I got it. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll take 2 points. I'll take 2.5, and I'll just amend what we had in writing. But there very rarely, I can think of one time I was with some buyers. One of my favorite buyer couples I've had. They're out of state people. And we were looking at houses, and we came across this really nice flip, and they were only offering 1%. And, I was straight up with them. We looked at the house, and I said, hey, it's very rare that I have to do this, but at 1%, like, I can't do that.
Right.
And you would have to come up with the other 1.5% to get to 2.5, because, like, 2.5 is as low as I can go. And they're like, oh, no. They're like, it was okay. The house is okay, but and we ended up getting them one that had 2.7%. But I only bring that up because at no point would I ever influence someone on their decision, saying like I'm not going to show it. I'm going to show it to them, but then I'll explain to them like, hey, and they liked me enough and they saw the value in that what I was adding to the transaction. They're like, okay, well we'll go to one where you're getting paid. So, like I say, it's just. To me, I think it's kind of lazy and kind of greedy if you're only going to offer the 1%. And if the numbers didn't make sense to you, you shouldn't have taken the listing.
Right. And here's the other thing with the buyer compensation. If you are a VA borrower, you cannot pay your real estate agent.
Yeah.
You can't. You can't pay admin fees. You can't pay their compensation. You can't pay anything. So if the seller is not offering a compensation, your agent will not get paid. And that is a huge problem. Would you work for free? Because I won't. Would you?
Yeah, no.
It doesn't help my daughter. It doesn't keep my roof over my head. It doesn't put food on her table.
Yeah, and that's what I say too. And I think the lack of buyer compensation comes from either greed or bad dealing by the listing agent, because I've turned down listings because the seller's not willing to pay the compensation that I feel that I deserve.
Yep.
And I have a certain point and I won't budge because it's like, it is my job and it's what I need to make a living, and I'm fully up for negotiation. But there's a bottom line that I need to make. And when you run the numbers, if the numbers don't make sense to me, I don't take the listing.
Yeah.
But I know there are people out there that it could be a $600,000 house and be like, oh, we can sell it for $680,000. And I'll do it for this percent just to get their foot in the door and get the paperwork signed. Mm-hmm. And then they overlist the house. It doesn't sell. And now they're probably offering shit to the buyer's agent for commissions.
Yep.
And then they have to bring it down. And then you just end up with a shitty experience. So it's like the agent that brings value, they charge what they charge for a reason. And I think my track record speaks for itself.
I do too, honestly. Like I've sold over 100 homes in my 9-year career.
Yep.
And I've done that all by myself. I didn't have help.
Yep.
So, I mean,
because I can think of specifically, there was a referral from one of my buyer clients, and I told her, I was like, yep, I generally do 6% because I have to split with the buyer's agent, and I pay for the staging, the photography, all that. So that comes out of my money. And she's like, oh, that's too expensive. I'm like, okay, that's perfectly fine. Good luck. So she went with a family member of hers that lives in a different state. He came here just to like get the document signed and then left again. And then she was kind of just left to her own devices. But it was cheaper. It was cheaper for her. And then 3 months of being on the market and it not selling, she called me and said, hey, like, you know, I'm in charge of my own open houses. I've had to show people. Yeah. She's hosted her own open houses. She's shown people it. And she's like, how hard would it be for me to cancel with my agent and sign with you? I'm like, well, I can't give you too much advice because you are signed with somebody else.
Right, like you can't coach people.
I was like, but you would call him and you guys would sign cancellation documents, and then we can have a conversation after that.
Right. And
she's like, okay, and how much are you charging? I was like, again, it'll be the 6%. She's like, that's a lot. So I don't know if she ever sold it because 6% was still too much.
Yeah.
And
that's okay.
But it was funny too because she kept asking like, how hard would it be for me to cancel with my agent? I was like, well, you have to sign the cancellation. I was like, some agents might come and ask for you to pay for the photography that they paid for if you're going to cancel. And she's like, well, I paid for the photography. And I was like,
what?
yeah. So I was like, well,
What?
So out of a professional courtesy, I didn't ask how much she was being charged. But I was like, you paid for your own
Easily,
photography.
at least $200.
She told me she paid for the sign, the photography, and she
paid for the sign?
And she did her own open houses.
The sign?
Yeah.
The sign?
Yeah.
Did it have her face on it?
No.
What?
So that's where
Wait,
I was,
hold on. Who's out here getting their clients to pay for their signs? Because I need to know what they're doing.
So I was in shock that she thought by going with him, she was saving money, not working with me.
Oh my gosh. But she wasn't, because that time has value as well, right? So she was robbed of her time having to host her own open houses.
Well, and literal money. She paid money for things he should have been paying for.
Yeah, absolutely. And the problem with that is that's also a safety concern, because she's allowing complete strangers into her home that she lives in, and she's making herself a target. That's a no-no. Absolutely not. No.
Yeah, and you can't save money if you don't make any money. If the house doesn't sell, you didn't make any money, so you didn't save anything.
You've wasted your time.
So, yeah, so that's another example I always bring up, because I was like, I was mind blown. And the fact that I didn't even get a call back after that, I was shocked further.
That is so wild.
Yeah.
That is so, real estate is so, there's something new every time. That's what I love about it, literally.
Yeah, so I guess to wrap it back to the beginning, con artists, I guess maybe there are some, because I would feel like a con artist, I guess, if I
did that, I would feel like a con artist. Yeah. I like to sleep at night, Jesus.
Well, it surprises me too, and maybe he felt confident doing that because it was a family member and that she wouldn't give him a bad review. But the thing is, I'm like always on my best behavior when it comes to clients, because
family member or not.
Well, yeah, and I'm just saying, well, I look out for my family, so I would never do that. But But my stuff's out there, like social media, the internet, that kind of rules our business now.
It does.
So, and people can find me whenever. So, I mean, I very much put myself out there. So, if I do a shitty job, I'll know, and other people will know.
And everybody's going to know. I'm going to know.
Yeah, exactly. So, everyone will know. So, I feel like I always give 100% and like my best effort, because that reflects on me and that's another thing that goes back to, like, I still get confused about the con artist thing, because if I was conning people, I wouldn't continue to get good reviews. I wouldn't get referral business from people who thought that I did a good job. Again, but I do think these comments come from people who have never, ever done it.
Yes, and those comments also come from people who have been hurt in sales before.
Yeah. Right?
They have come across some sort of snake oil salesman or whatever the case is, or they know a family member who's gotten screwed over or something like that. Like, we're not out here as used car salesmen. Like, that's not what we're doing. You're not buying a $20,000 car. You're buying a $350,000 home for your family to live under. Yeah. It's a much different business. Yes, our homes most of the time have been pre-owned. Yes, they were built, or in the early 1900s in some cases. You're not going to get a perfect house, but it's not the agent's fault. The agent's responsibility is to make sure that you are best represented if they are working in your favor. If you choose not to hire a buyer's agent, that is on you. You are dealing directly with the listing agent who is representing the seller and nobody else but the seller. Their responsibility is to make sure the seller gets everything the seller wants. Yep. So yes, you need a buyer's agent, because that is your life raft.
Yeah. So I guess I'll end my rant with this.
Your rant.
For people that are like celebrating the fall of real estate agents as they see it with the lawsuits and stuff, I just want to warn you, you're going towards a place where Zillow is running the real estate market like it is Amazon. You're no longer dealing with an agent. You're dealing with a Zillow consultant. And at that point, I'm guessing the National Association of Realtors is no longer existing, so they don't have to abide by any ethics. They don't owe you anything. And you will just be buying. The biggest financial decision you could ever make is now in the hands of people who they don't owe you anything ethically.
Yeah.
So.
And the other thing is a lot of people don't even know the National Association of Realtors exists, but they're the ones that have their hands in housing to make sure that equal housing opportunities exist. So if it wasn't for the National Association of Realtors, we could very possibly still be segregated. It
Oh,
could
yeah.
be very hard for people to get loans, or even harder for people to get loans. It could be harder for people to move into different neighborhoods. These things could very well not have happened if we didn't have the National Association of Realtors.
Yeah.
Like, they really, really push for the public to have the opportunity and have a better life. And a lot of people don't even recognize it.
Yeah. Like I say, I'm worried people don't know what they're rooting for, and then if they get what they want, it'll be too late.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
they'll realize that it sucks. But
Hindsight's 2020. It always is.
Once the toothpaste is out of that tube, it's not going to go back. So
Right. I like that.
that wraps up episode 37.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yes, thanks for joining us. Please continue to comment, post, like, subscribe, turn on notifications. But yeah, this is all good. Love breaking down the comments. As always, I'm Blair Berg. This is Amber Perez, and this has been the Real Estate Sit Down.